A quick update before we get to episode 10. I have a message to read from Kari Harbath, who I will chat with in this episode. I'm saddened to say Aaron, Sloan's dad, passed away on June 2nd. This loss has been devastating for our family, and as you'll hear throughout the episode, Aaron's claim to fame will always be his amazing entry into fatherhood. Sloan is lucky to call him her dad. He was an extremely dedicated and loving father, and we all love and miss him dearly. To Kari, Aaron, and Sloan, I'm shattered for your loss and in awe of the fierce love that you have for each other. You can support Kari and Sloan monetarily by donating to their GoFundMe. The link is in the show notes. And now let's continue on to the episode.
Nothing has been very normal around here.
Yeah, seriously.
But that's cool. It's cool. What is normal, right?
Hi, you're listening to episode 10 of The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney. Now that we are in August, we have a new question of the month. Thank you so much for everyone who contributed to July's question of the month. To see those answers, head over to the website, therarelifepodcast.com. There will be a link to that in the show notes. This month's question is, what has helped you follow through on advice from your child's therapist and medical team? One more time, what has helped you follow through on advice from your child's therapist and medical team? I love this question. It goes along very well with Kari's special topic episode, which comes out next week. So head on over to answer that question. I'd love to hear your input. Today, you get to listen in on my conversation with mom, Kari. She is mother to Sloan, who just turned 1. She has Charge syndrome, which is an acronym for the different birth defects that often comes along with that. In this episode, we mostly talk about Sloan's profound deaf blindness, which is the most life-altering birth defect that she has. We also talk about her birth story and how her dreams for her daughter has shifted in awesome ways. As a caution, her birth story does contain possible triggers, so proceed with caution. We met at a deaf blindness parent conference. It was really great to connect with her and her husband, and we even found out we have the same PT for our children, so that was really cool. I've been able to follow her on Instagram, and she posts a lot of really great stuff on there about her daughter's journey, and she's super inspiring. If you're interested in giving her a follow, her username is Sloan_strength, which I highly recommend because she's awesome. So Kari is a lover of Harry Potter and outdoor adventuring. And without further ado, let's get into our conversation. Kari, I was so excited to have you on tonight. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I am excited to be here and to talk through everything special needs parenting, at least what I know so far. It's only been a year, which is crazy to think about, but we're here. We made it.
Yes.
So
the learning curve is huge.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think I'm just at probably the tip of the iceberg, but at least we're there.
Oh,
So,
I don't know. For me, I feel like the first year was definitely the hardest. And then after that, it's like you kind of are used to it and you're like, you got your groove.
No, that's true. That's what I hear. Everybody keeps telling me that, like just the first year. And on Sloan's birthday, everybody was like, you made it. Like, you're here. And so that was really cool. But
yeah, no, totally. Because it's like you're used to it. Like you've got
it. Yeah.
So to start off, tell me about Sloan. Who is she? What is her life like? How much do you love her?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we love her like crazy, probably to the point that she's like, you guys leave me alone. But
awesome.
She is awesome. Wow. There's so much that goes along with who Sloan is. When we went into the parenting journey, and I think everybody has an expectation, whether you're on like a typical journey or not. And the child comes as they come, and your expectation changes, maybe goes away, but in a good way, because they're their own individual and they're amazing and strong and they are their own person. And Sloan is definitely her own person. And she just like, we always say she's our meteorite baby, that she just like hit our life in a big way. And she really did. She, you know, the word, and this is slightly inappropriate, so you can edit it out if you want. We always used to describe Sloan as actually badass.
Yeah.
Super strong. She's like amazing in terms of she's been through more, you know, and I'm sure you feel this way about Kimball, but she's been through more than most adults I know in just probably the first 6 months of her life.
Right.
And she obviously came into the world and we didn't know if she would make it to the next day. Here she is a year later and she finds so much joy and meaning in life. And I think she's taught us in a lot of ways to find joy and meaning in life that we never really knew before and never really thought about, because her sensory experience and who she is different than us. And so she's taught us new ways to find connection and love. And she's just a great teacher, and she's a great person and smart and strong, and we are blown away by her every day. And we just love her more than we ever thought humanly possible, to a point that it's like, okay, we've got to like, she needs her space sometimes, because we can, I don't know if you've ever heard of the term cute aggression, but we definitely have cute aggression whenever we're around Sloan, and we just want to pinch her cheeks and her arms, and she has the cutest little face. And anyway, so we have to curb that a little bit, but she's wonderful.
I
So
love
our person.
that. That
Yeah.
is so awesome. Um, so you mentioned that with her sensory experience, that you have learned a lot from her about how to be happy or have joy. I know about Sloan and her sensory experience. Can you explain a
Yeah.
little bit about that? What
Yeah,
that's like
yeah,
for
for
her?
sure. So of all of Sloane's diagnoses, the biggest one and probably the one with the most lifelong impact is that she is deafblind.
Mm-hmm.
We had some idea going into Sloane's birth, because she was at her 20-week ultrasound. We knew of her cleft lip and palate, and she had club feet. So those were the things we knew at the 20-week ultrasound. And sometimes with kids that have a cleft palate or a cleft lip, hearing concerns can go along with that. So
Oh, okay.
whether it's hearing aids or cochlear implants or profoundly deaf, like we knew that could be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Many times there's fluid buildup in their ears. And so we were kind of prepped for that. Not as prepped as, I don't think you can ever be prepared, you know, until
Yeah.
like the day you hear it and find out, but we were kind of ready. But we didn't know
Mm.
about her being blind at all.
Oh, wow.
And we found out in the NICU one day. We were sitting there and had no clue. We had been given a little bit of notice that something looked a little bit different about her eyes, but they needed the ophthalmologist to come double check.
Mm.
And we were sitting by her bedside, and the ophthalmologist came up to us and said that he had checked her eyes and that the most she would ever see would be shadows. And then he walked off.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was something we were totally unprepared for and caught us completely off guard. And we left the NICU and had to kind of get ourselves together and come back. And then the next day, I think, was the day that we found out that she was profoundly deaf with little to no treatment. So the reason there's little to no treatment for both her blindness and being deaf is because both her cochlear nerves and her optic nerves are severely malformed.
Okay.
So it goes beyond cochlear implants or hearing aids. And then same with her optic nerves. There's really not much treatment in the way of that they can do. Um,
Mm.
so we found that out, and it was like, I mean, it was just devastating.
Yeah.
And I know I kind of wrote about this on her Instagram page the other day, but we sort of thought it was all over at that point. We didn't know. We weren't exposed to the deafblind community. We didn't know
Mm.
anything. We knew some things about the deaf community, but not the
Mm-hmm.
deafblind community. And that to
Okay.
us just seemed like such a double whammy
Yeah.
that we couldn't wrap our minds around it.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of made it through the NICU, came home, and then suddenly, the deaf blind school started coming by. We had these wonderful people, shout out to Margaret and Sunday, that came by and started to kind of guide us on our journey with Sloan. And it's really, truly amazing to see what she's done in the face of being deafblind so far. And she is so
Mm.
capable, so smart, so aware, especially with her hands. Watching her use
Oh.
her hands is amazing. And she's 1 year old. She can sign eat. So she
Oh.
signs eat already, and she's very aggressive. about it. So, so you know when
That's
she's
awesome.
because you just see her like sitting there signing eat repeatedly, and we're like, okay, we'll get you your bottle. But
Oh.
she's amazing at that. And then just she will take something, and before she even moves it to her face or gets really excited about it, you'll see her furrow her brow, and she'll move it between her hands and spin it around and feel it and make sure that's kind of the
Mm.
her feeling is like her seeing. That's her
Mhm.
way of really connecting with whatever she has at that moment.
Yeah.
um she's learned to me, not so much my long hair. She knows me by my long hair for sure. But Aaron, dad, she has learned to identify him. The minute she is in his arms, she'll grab his beard,
Oh.
and she knows it's him. And there have been times where she'll go for my face, and you can tell she's disappointed because she's like, I want a dad.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
Yeah. And so really cool things that, I mean, it's still hard. And as a parent, it's something that we didn't ever really think we'd have to face. And
Mhm.
something that if we could help her, you know, have more sensory input from the world, we definitely would, because that would help
Mhm.
her just in guiding her everyday life. Um, but with all of that said, we've been really amazed at what she's done so far. And I think that's only going to continue as she gets older. She's just,
Yeah.
really amazing. Um, and it's been really cool to have her team of experts come through and show us so many different ways to engage with her and so many ways to help her communicate. And I think, she has a really bright future ahead of her in that regard. So,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
amazing. What does her communication look like for her future? What kind of options have you talked about with her therapist?
Yeah, so that's a good question because there are many. She's actually very smart, very aware right now of her surroundings.
Okay.
And they have talked about potentially getting to a place where we can use tactile sign with her, which
Okay.
is basically like ASL, except that many times the signs are maybe modified a little bit, or it could be an altogether different sign. It just depends on if it can be sort of modified to fit like within two hands or
Mhm.
on the body so that she can feel the full sign. So for eat right now, she taps her chin.
Mhm.
And for her being so little, I mean, it's just like a toddler when they have cute speech impediments or something that comes up. So
Yeah.
she's just touching her chin, and we know that's eat. But
Mhm.
eventually, we hope to get to a place where we can show her different movements with her hands that express different signs. And many times, tactile sign, you'll sign into each other's hands.
Okay. Yeah.
So if she's speaking to me, I will hold out my hand and she'll sign into that, and then I will sign back. It's amazing though. I mean, it can go as far as we were talking to, I think it was Margaret the other day, and she knows of people that will sign and they will feel they can be signing into their hand, and then the deaf blind individual will feel the tendons on the top of their hand, and they know what they're saying just by touching the tendons on the top of their
Oh my
hand and
gosh.
the movement of those muscles. Yeah. So, I mean, who knows where Sloan will end up, but there are lots
Yeah.
of options. And so far, she's showing really strong skills in terms of communication.
Awesome.
So she's kind of adapting her own signs right now, but eventually we're hoping to guide her in a way that she understands at least tactile sign, if
Mhm.
not more. ASL maybe. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Have you guys started learning those signs yet, or are you kinda waiting?
Yeah. Yeah, so we've learned a little bit. Eat for sure was the big one.
Mhm.
We have been signing a few other things. We've been doing things like so we do eat, we do swing. So she has a sensory swing where
Okay.
we take her out and swing her in her sensory swing probably 5 times a day, just
Mhm.
for 10 to 15 minutes. And it helps keep her, she looks for a lot of stimulus with her body, and
Mm.
so her sensory swing helps keep her kind of regulated throughout the day. So she's not like seeking stimulus and moving her head a lot and trying to, get that stimulus. She's a little bit more comfortable and regulated so that she can do the everyday activities. So we learned how to sign swing, and that's something we do frequently. Kind of the
Okay.
basics right now, just like you would with, verbal, like speaking baby, and just
Mhm.
saying like, oh, hi, or mom, dad,
Mhm.
her regular activities like jump, swing, eat, things like that. So that's kind of
Okay.
where we're at. We have probably 6 or 7 that we're
Okay.
working on right now. And then as she learns those, we'll continue to increase like how many we're learning at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. That's so much to like learn a language on top of everything
Yes.
else.
Oh my gosh. I remember that was something too initially. And again, it's all, it's like that, I guess, probably like we mentioned earlier, that first year sort of
Mm,
hustle to get through that first year. But
mm-hmm,
that's something that we really attribute to our team of people in helping us kind of guide us like what we need to do because it was so overwhelming, especially when
mm,
we received the diagnosis and we really didn't know what Sloan was going to be doing a year from then. And so really we were just trying to get through the big medical challenges. But
mm,
now it would be so overwhelming to think like, oh my gosh, I have to learn an entirely new language right now to keep up with Sloan.
mm-hmm,
But luckily, thanks to people like Sunday or Margaret or the people that have been guiding us in the deaf blind sense and that communication, we
mm-hmm,
um, we know kind of the specific words we should be using and when. And that will
mm.
continue to ramp up. But right now, we're really focusing on those keywords with Sloan, and so it's really helped
Yeah.
kind of guiding us along the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And so Sloan, I know that with charge syndrome, sometimes it affects cognition, but you were saying that that seems like she might be I don't know, the word I think of is like
Yeah.
cognitively typical.
Yeah, we
Sure.
think
Okay.
so. It's so, and as you know, it's so hard to tell. I mean, just being like 1 year old so
Mhm.
far, but so far, it was really cool. Our OT, Allie, she ran us through the list of 12-month-old milestones,
Mhm.
which for most people is, like a big deal, but not that big of a deal. It's like, oh yeah, we expected they would do this and this and this.
Right.
But she ran us through the list of 12-month-old milestones on Sloane's birthday, actually. And she did that to point out that other than the really obvious things like vision and hearing specific stuff, like looks at mom or,
Mhm.
responds to her name,
Right.
like stuff like that, Sloane's right in line with all of the other
Wow.
milestones, which was really cool and is,
Yeah.
just goes to show like Sloan has done some really cool things. But also that makes us think that right now, cognitively, she's
Mhm.
very capable. And having learned
Yeah.
to eat the way she has, she's very capable of keeping up with that. So we're trying to stay ahead of her, but she's just too good.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I can like we had questions too about Kimball's cognition at the beginning because he was really delayed, but like he's also deafblind, so it's like not quite as severely, but it's like, so is that because of his cognition or is that because he can't hear us very well or
Yeah.
I feel like it is a huge because we also have felt like oh he's cognitively typical like after like the first year when you can watch
Yes.
them more and there
Yes.
is that sense of relief and not that you wouldn't love them just as much if they had like cognitive issues but it's like oh like their life will be easier and like
Yes. No, we felt that way too. And I think the biggest thing too for us that we feared in the beginning was communication. And
yeah.
so now being at a place where we're like, wow, I mean, I don't know what we thought, right? But we had
Mhm.
not been exposed to any of it. And so
Mhm.
now I feel a bit like naive in saying like, our life was over, but it's just sort of the reality of what we felt
Yeah.
because it was such a life altering thing for us and so unexpected. But
Mhm.
now it's amazing to see that she can communicate. And even if it's her own
Mhm.
form of communication that only we understand in the moment, like that communication is there. And she knows when she's with me and she knows when she's with Erin or her Aunt Cassie. Like she knows who she's with
Mhm.
and when and expresses joy and sadness at the appropriate times. Like she's just been, in terms of communication, it's been a really strong suit where we were fearing that that would not be. And so we've been really
Yeah.
amazed by that.
Yeah, yeah, and like where communication is just gonna be that much harder for her than
Yes.
like typical children are like us. It's
Yeah.
like that is amazing that she has that extra drive because like I don't know, that sounds like I'm just picturing that. Like if I couldn't see it all and I couldn't hear it all, like that would be I don't know. I feel like it'd be scary, but like I don't know. These kids are amazing because they don't know any different, and I feel like that's a huge asset to them. Like, I remember when, like,
Oh
Kimball
my
was
gosh.
little and I was like, "I feel so bad for him," and, like, my sister was like, "Maddie, he doesn't know any different. Like,
Yes.
he's happy because this is great for him. Like, life is great and I don't know, like, I was
Yeah.
comparing him to typical
Loved.
babies, but, like,
Yeah.
he's just happy with what he has."
Yes,
And,
exactly.
um
I Yeah, I love that, and I think that there's a big sort of lesson to be learned from that. And that's something that we are always working on, but something that we learned quickly from Sloan. That was probably one of the first
Mm,
big things of like, okay, she is amazing and
mhm.
strong and happy. Actually, a good example is when we go to get a shot.
Mhm.
And she has had so many experiences of pain now. And I think so many things that maybe in some ways a shot is pretty normal to feels
Yeah.
pretty normal to her. Like it shocks her, but then within seconds, she's like, okay, that was nothing. I mean, I have this
Mhm.
picture of her getting a shot and she's just like looking at me like, I've got this, mom. Like, what are you,
That's
like
amazing.
it's just kind of this sense of like, I've got this. And
Mhm.
so I think we have learned from her. And you mentioned that about Kimball, like that at first we felt the same way. We're like, this is horrible. And
Mhm.
then and seeing them in the NICU and
Mhm.
just like the cords and eventually the trach and all of these things, the G tube all being added up. And we're like, this should be happening to a 2-month-old baby. And
Yeah.
then now you realize it only bettered her quality of life as she came home and she was able to thrive and grow.
Mhm.
And she doesn't know any different. And
Yeah.
so, like, while we do, I think sometimes it's probably harder,
Yeah.
even though it sounds selfish, but harder on us than it is them because we're the ones that know different, not them?
Yeah. Yeah. And watching your
Yeah.
child suffer is like the worst thing in the whole
Yes.
world.
Yes. Oh
It's
my gosh. Yeah.
so painful.
Yeah.
Oh
And
man.
to sort of to the extremes, I think like again, like we didn't plan on it, just like anybody, you don't plan on any of this. And so
Mhm.
you've been thrust into those scenarios where you're like, this looks like something out of a movie, whether it's
Mhm.
like an
Yeah.
ER visit or the NICU or the like critical care unit, whatever it might be. And and it's so hard to get through that and watch them, but somehow they bounce right back and it's
Mhm.
amazing and they smile through it. And even if they're not smiling, they're just like getting through it in big ways and you're just like, wow, I we all probably have we need to take a page out of their book for that reason.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally. I want to kind of go back to like when you first that 20-week ultrasound you were talking
Yeah.
about and you first found out that Sloane's body was not typical. Like it wasn't forming how you expected it to or how like, it normally would. Um what was that like?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a biggie. And again, that was sort of the turning point. Like we didn't the whole pregnancy for me was pretty rough. I had really bad like all day sickness up until the
Mm,
20-week ultrasound. And actually after looking back talking to my OB, looking back on research and different things, um they I guess when it comes to like genetic anomalies or different things that can cause hormonal changes in your body
oh
which can actually
wow.
make you sicker. And so that
Interesting.
was just an interesting little thing I learned along now, but at the
Yeah.
time I was super sick and
Mm,
many people like my mom and Aaron were like, this is really unusual, like we did
yeah.
this and it was really violent and rough. And I had, not to the extent of some people, but it was definitely on the end of like not normal.
Oh man.
Nothing has been very normal around here.
Yeah, seriously.
But that's cool. It's cool. What is normal, right?
Yeah.
Um, but so we made it to our 20-week ultrasound through that. And I remember always saying, oh my gosh, morning sickness is going to be the worst pain I have ever, and I should say all day sickness. I don't know where, but
Yeah,
all
yeah.
day sickness is like the worst thing I ever experienced. And then we hit our 20-week ultrasound. We went in, my parents had like full cameras. We were all set up and we're all just sitting there and it's like, oh, cute. And again, being naive in some respects, I went in
Mhm.
thinking, boy or girl,
Yeah.
like, right?
Yep.
Like boy or
Yep.
girl.
That's all this is for, right?
Yeah, that's all this is. It's great. So cute. Everybody knew it was the 20-week ultrasound. We all knew what we were going to find out. So of course my phone was, like full of text messages, everybody wondering if I knew anything yet.
Mm.
So we get in there, everything's going pretty normal, and suddenly the technician was wonderful. She's been doing this for a long time, and she said something to the effect of like, "Oh, it looks like um, Sloan has a cleft lip." I think that was the first thing that came up, really,
Mm.
and it was like the energies just shifted. But I was trying to be cool,
Mm.
and just play it cool, like it's fine, no big deal. And I was like, okay. And internally, of course, you think, which is something that I've reflected on, and a lot of people say this to you, and this is something I've reflected on, like, we don't always know, and there's some hardship in that, and there's some, I think, comfort in that. But it was kind of that mentality of, oh, it's treatable. Okay, I know wonderful people that have had a cleft lip or a
Yeah.
cleft palate, and it's treatable and easy. Not
Yeah.
not easy, but like in the
We can
on the
fix it.
yes, we can fix it. Like it's something that we can fix.
Mm-hmm.
And so initially I was like, oh, okay, well, we can do that. And then it was mentioned, oh, it looks like, she might have club feet as well. And so then immediately we were sort of thrust into, we need to get genetic testing done to see if it's something syndromic.
Mm.
So that day itself was really hard. I remember coming out, and they actually took my blood pressure after the ultrasound for some reason.
Mm.
And my blood pressure already, it was something I was struggling with a little bit, but it skyrocketed. And at that point, that was when I kind of broke down. My my OB and the team there, they were wonderful, and we ended up deciding to do an amnio, mostly to see. Aaron and I are sort of, although we've learned a lot about this throughout this whole experience, but we're sort of answers people. So we
Mm-hmm.
really, with no other reason other than to see if we could plan for what was
Mm-hmm.
going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because if we found out it was syndromic, that insurance would cover us to deliver at the U so that Sloan
Okay.
could immediately be sent to primary children.
Mm-hmm.
However, after testing, they came back and said that it just happened to be that we hit sort of the two most common genetic anomalies in the book. And as time went on, I had multiple maternal fetal medicine ultrasounds after that, and it was like one a week until she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I had one, they were like, "Oh, she's getting stronger." There were a couple of times that people mentioned her chin looked a little recessed, but
Mm-hmm.
other than that, it was like, "Oh, she's growing. She's amazing. Like she's going to be just fine." They're,
Mm-hmm.
just physical differences. That's it.
Oh, wow.
And and then yeah, we couldn't have predicted what sort of happened after that. But I will say that, that 20-week ultrasound, and I have read this a lot about other parents and different journeys, but that was the game changer for sure. Like
Yeah.
when I think it all started to shift and change.
Mm-hmm.
I One thing that I know is it's different for everybody. I didn't have a lot of anxiety
Mm-hmm.
after that, and I don't know if it was because I was getting a lot of reassurance from people like, "Oh, it's treatable, no big deal.
Yeah.
It'll be hard, but it's not the worst," kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if it was that, in some ways, and I know this probably sounds a little woo-woo, but I think there was always sort of this instinct of like something felt a little off from the beginning of the pregnancy and different
Oh.
than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we found that out, I just sort of started to settle in the fact of like, well, what's going to happen is going to happen, and we're going to
Mm.
bring Sloan into this world and just hope for the best. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the route I took. And also, I was just so sick that I don't think I had the mental capacity or like fortitude to do anything.
Mm. Did you
um,
stay really sick like the whole pregnancy?
well, probably until maybe like week 24, 25, it lightened
Oh
up a little bit.
man.
Yeah, but it was
Ugh.
rough. And then again toward the end, so that was when things really started to get intense because um I was put on bed rest the last like 2 weeks before Sloan was born.
Oh.
And yeah, and then 2 days before she was delivered by emergency C-section, her movement was starting to slow. And
Oh
so
wow.
she wasn't moving like she was. And, my doctor was like, it's reassuring enough. But if you feel her slow down at all, I need you to come right back in. And he was wonderful. I left one day and came home, and I looked at Aaron and I was like, I don't feel Sloan. And so we went right back in, and he
Mm.
said, let's get Sloan out. Things aren't looking good. And it
Oh wow.
immediately just turned into an emergency. Like everything
Oh
at
my
that point was an
gosh.
emergency. Um,
And up
so
and up until that point, you didn't have any, they weren't preparing you like all you knew were her cleft lip and palate and her club feet. That was it. You
yes,
had no preparation for like NICU stays or
no,
okay.
nope,
Okay. So then you rush into I feel like that probably is another turning point was like an emergency C-section and then
yes.
everything just
And then it just took off.
being
Yeah.
crazy. Okay.
Yeah. So her movement was slowing down. Her heart rate was dropping. And that was the big reason that when I came back
Oh.
in, her heart rate was dropping significantly. And they really couldn't get a good read on her heart rate, but all they could tell is it wasn't great.
Oh no.
And so they tried an epidural. The epidural didn't work. And
Oh.
then it was like a day and I want to say about 24 hours later, my doctor came in and I can remember him saying, and my mom had 3 C-sections. So I know
Okay.
that sometimes there's like a stigma around C-sections, but for
Mm-hmm.
me, I was like, just get her out and healthy. Like that was
Yeah.
all. I didn't really care about much else at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so my doctor came in and he said to all of us, he was like, look, Sloan isn't doing well. Kari's not doing well. We are going to perform an emergency C-section either now, or if you need to think about it, we'll be performing an emergency C-section in an hour. That's kind
Oh
of the way he phrased
man.
it. And he was like, so you decide now or you decide in an hour, but I can guarantee there's not going to be enough progress to deliver any other way.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
but for me, it was no question. So I said, yeah, let's do a C-section.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Aaron agreed, and my whole family was on board. And so, um, and that was really where it was like the energy again. It was another shift. And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly there were like 10 people in the room, and everybody was moving really fast. And I remember both of us kind of remarked on how it seemed really unusual again, all of a sudden, like something wasn't right. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe there were things that they didn't need to tell us, but they weren't telling us about that, like, I guess, reasons why they were moving so quickly.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so within probably 10 or 15 minutes, we was being rolled back to the OR. Um, and they rolled me back. All I can remember, so then the like the pain medication and the I'm trying to think of the word, numbing agent, whatever they
Mm-hmm.
used, it was not working.
Oh my gosh.
So there was another layer. It was just like one thing after another and emergency on emergency. So they gave me the hard medicine that totally knocked me out, just wiped me out.
Oh my gosh.
And Aaron, of course, is cognizant and with it through this entire experience. So I was completely wiped out, and out came Sloan, and she had, she was a gorgeous, wild, bloody baby that was just born. I mean, babies are cute, but they're always a little bit interesting when they first come out.
Yeah.
She was definitely that. But she didn't start crying and didn't make a
Mm.
lot of noise. And so my doctor held her up. I can remember him showing her to me, and I was like, oh, yeah. And I can remember him very distinctly leaning over the curtain and just saying, big, healthy baby. He kept saying that over and over, probably
Oh.
because of the medicine I was on.
Yeah.
And so he knew like that was the only thing that would stick. Um, so they rushed Sloan. They had a NICU team on standby, and they rushed Sloan back to the NICU team. And Aaron, we had made a pact that whatever happened, Aaron would go with Sloan and that I would be good, on my own. And
Mhm.
then my parents were waiting back in the room.
Mhm.
And so Aaron took off into the room with Sloan. And then, the way he's described it is he walked in and they were trying to intubate her. And she's really hard to intubate. And
Oh.
especially right after birth, because Sloan and I were so swollen, they couldn't get the, intubation to work.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so they tried for what, Aaron said it felt like an eternity, but for about 3 minutes, and it wasn't working, and she was not doing well. And he just kind of hung back and watched it all happen. And eventually they were successful on like the fourth try.
Mm.
Um, and then the nurses were wonderful, as they always have been, but they had him come over and hold her hand and take pictures.
Mhm.
And um, and then they immediately were like, things don't seem great, and we need to life flight her to primary children's.
Oh
Um,
man.
and so then, cue emergency round 4, whatever it is at this.
Yeah.
And so I had been rolled back to the room. Aaron came back, told my parents, and then they had actually advised they had to life flight her. And so they advised that he stay, or he take the car down because,
Okay.
they said he won't, which was really good advice. It sounds kind of harsh now, but at the time, it's so traumatic, and it's stuff that we're still trying to get over to this day, um, and probably will for a long time.
Mhm.
But they advised that he not take the helicopter ride to primary children's because it's such a tight space,
Mm.
and because if something goes wrong, there's nothing he can do anyway. Like and he shouldn't be there to have to witness
Oh,
that.
wow.
So it was a hard decision to make, but it was good advice.
Okay.
And she made it. She, obviously, my dad and Aaron went down that night, and then my mom stayed back with me.
Oh,
And
man.
I think it took me probably 2 days, and I was out of there.
That probably was such a hard 2 days.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, for my experience, I was so out of it. I can kind of remember they brought her in the incubator to say goodbye before they took her off on the flight. But
Mhm.
I don't remember much of that. There are pictures, but I don't remember like much when it comes to that experience. But it was a lot of FaceTime, which is a weird way to experience your like first child.
Yeah.
And then we didn't get to hold her for uh well, we got to hold her within probably the first week and a half, and then after that we didn't hold her for 3 weeks, because she was so high risk. And if something, if the she was so hard to intubate that if something changed or slipped, that could be life threatening.
Wow.
And so we held her once for about 15 minutes, covered in blue lights, and there were like 7 respiratory techs standing around me. And that was the extent of it for 3 weeks until we
Oh
actually
my
got to hold her.
gosh.
So yeah, it
So,
was an experience.
what was so why did she need intubation? What was causing that?
So she, among being deafblind, she has a few other things and diagnoses. So she had what's called micronathia. So that's where your chin is basically small, and
Okay.
it was blocking off her airway. Um,
Oh.
in, in tandem with that, she also was really swollen. Both Sloan and I were super swollen. And she had some blockage in her throat of some kind,
Okay.
and they were able to kind of clear that out. But yeah, she has micronathia. She has her cleft lip, cleft palate, a duplicated pituitary gland, cleft feet, a small corpus callosum. She had a VSD in her heart, but it's pretty much closed, and then she's deafblind. So that's kind of her
Okay.
list of diagnoses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when did the trach come into play?
So that was actually, so they didn't think that they would be able to extubate her. So that day was really cool because we went in thinking that it was going to be the last time we saw her, quite frankly, when they went in to extubate Sloan.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and again, Sloan in her wild, crazy Sloan way, um, we were waiting on the couch to hear how it went, and we thought either she would not make it or she would be intubated again for a while until they could figure out what to do next. But they extubated her, and she was upstairs, extubated, no breathing tube, and she was making it. She needed to be on really high flow oxygen. But eventually they figured out that she just wasn't breathing like they had hoped. Again, it's the micronathia, so her chin was really, really small at birth. And when I look back on pictures, it's crazy to look at because it's grown a lot now.
Okay.
Um, and we get comments all the time that like, "Oh, her cheeks are so cute," and it's like, yes, they are cute. But internally, there's always sort of this moment of like, yeah, they're cute because her chin is so tiny,
Oh.
And so it's like
Yeah.
we let people sit in that, like, yes, they are so cute, but for us,
Yeah.
it's always like, yeah, but also the reason why the trach exists, and like, there's a many
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but her chin was so tiny, and she just didn't have a ton of, I guess, breathing room in her mouth. And then she has her cleft palate. So the cleft palate creates more space for oxygen to, kind of lose traction going down into
Oh.
her lungs. So ultimately, through all of that and her being on high flow oxygen, they decided that a trach was the best solution to allow her chin to grow. And then, if, which now we're at the year mark, if in about a year it didn't grow like they had hoped, we will actually be doing an orthodontic procedure called distractors, where they put in, they're kind of like metal brackets in the back of her jaw. And then
Mm.
we twist those metal brackets once every like two, actually, I think it could be almost an every other day thing. But we twist those, and eventually, just kind of like braces or anything else, it'll push her jaw out and push her
Oh,
chin
wow.
out so that it opens up more room for her to breathe. Um, and we had, so that was the cause for the trach, to kind of get to that point, allow her to grow, thrive, and then
Mhm.
we would revisit a surgery. Um, And it's looking like, she's grown a lot. She is doing really well. And it looks like we'll probably still need to do distractors, but not for very long. And it may be fall or hopefully before this next flu season that she actually gets the trach out, which is really exciting.
Oh, that is so exciting.
Yes. It's going to be a whole new life at that point. But
yeah. Oh
yeah.
man. That's awesome. Well, just to wrap up.
Yeah.
What do you hope for Sloan in her life? Both that she learns from you and just from life in general. What kind of person do you see her being or hope that she is?
Yeah, that's a good one. That'll probably make me tear up. I almost made it.
Sorry.
Almost. No, that's just the reality of our life, I think.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the biggest lessons this whole thing has taught me. Because, here we go. Okay. I'm good. Before Sloan's birth, if you would have asked me that, I would have said something to the effect of like, great dancer. Like, that's a silly example, but like great dancer, super smart, headed to Harvard, like big aspirations, right? That we probably all have and wish for our children. But this has been a really grounding experience in that Sloan or any future child or family member that, we might have in our life. Now, really all I wish, the biggest thing for me is kindness, I think, like just being a kind-hearted person, whatever that looks like for you, differences, if you have a disability, if whatever it might be, just that there's a level of kindness there. Yeah. So I hope Sloan, I hope we can instill in her just kind-hearted ways. And had young Shin.
Yeah.
Love.
Oh yeah, we love her.
Yeah, the best. But young Shin has said so many times, which I'm sure she said about Kimball, because she says it to everybody. But she has said Sloan is going to do what Sloan's going to do, which sounds so simple. And that, basically Sloan's going to be her own person and everybody's her own person, but it's true. And so I think our goal is to allow and help Sloan continue to thrive and develop like Sloan is going to thrive and develop, and love her and help her feel loved and connected and teach her, kindness and love back along the way. And I think they sound like really basic tenets of life and really sort of cheesy things. But at the end of the day, I think through this whole experience, I've learned like, being on the drill team in high school is cool, or, like going to some major, university is amazing. But at the end of the day, what I really hope for is that she feels loved and that knows how to love and be kind, whatever that looks like for her. So that's kind of where it sits, at least today.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Kari. You're amazing. And I just love hearing more about Sloan and your life with her.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I just feel so honored.
As usual, you can find photos of Sloan and her family on the website, therarelifepodcast.com. Just look for episode 10, where you can also find a link to the sensory swing Kari talked about. Next week, I'll be talking to Kari again about her special topic, which is embracing your child's medical and therapy tribe. It's a fabulous conversation, and I highly recommend it. Please share this podcast with anyone you know that could benefit from it.